set the scene a little bit.
I'm basically heading up a team that's getting Africans together in this time of need for Norway, you know, helping them out. A lot of people aren't aware of what's going on there right now. It's kind of just as bad as poverty, if you ask me. Sunlight puts smiles on people's faces. People don't ignore starving people, so why should we ignore poor people? Frostbite kills too. Africa, we need to make a difference in Norway. We need to collect our radiators, ship them over there, and spread some warmth, spread some light, and spread some smiles. Say yes to radiate.
And this is their new Christmas video, single that they just released.
It's time for us to get this heat enough for Norway. If Africans would share, if Africans can we can contribute. The warmth they've got we'd like to share, but we can distribute.
So we were trying to get the t-shirts for everybody, but
yes,
it's just a very new release on its social media. And the, if you look at who did this, so there's a website, Africa for Norway, but there's it's a collaboration between Norwegian students and international cooperation development agencies. So it's it puts a different perspective on development and aid and who gets from whom. When we hear about Africa, it's we sometimes think that first of all that Africa is a country. Kind of wrong. And the other thing that we think very often is that if the Africans were just like us, wouldn't be the world a better place? So if they just adopted everything that we know and that we do, and the tables are turning, and there's a different perspective on things. And I think this is a great example of what Africa can do for Norway. There's a more serious thing, and it's you might have heard about TED Talks. This is not as recent as the Africa for Norway project, but it's an amazing video, I think, and it's an example of what people can do when they take things into their own hands and when they have access to the knowledge that they need.
Good to see you. So, we've got a picture, I think. Where is this?
This is my home. This is where I live.
Where? What country?
In Malawi, in Kasungu. Yeah, Malawi.
Okay, now you're 19 now?
Yeah, I'm 19 years now.
5 years ago you had an idea. What was that?
I want to make a windmill.
A windmill?
Yeah.
And so, what, to power, for lighting and stuff?
Yeah.
So what did you do? How did you realize that?
After I dropped out from school, I went to library and I read a book titled Using Energy, and I get information about windmill, and I try and I made it.
So you copied, you exactly copied the design in the book?
No. I just...
What happened?
In fact, a design of the windmill that it was in the book, it have got 3 plates, and mine have got 4 plates.
The book had 3, yours had 4. And you made it out of what?
I made 4 plates just because I want to increase power.
Okay, yeah. Did you tested 3 and found that 4 worked better?
Yeah,
huh.
I just...
And what did you make the windmill out of? What materials did you use?
I use a bicycle frame and a pulley and plastic pipe, wooden poles.
We have a picture of that. Can we have the next slide?
Yeah, so that's the windmill.
And that windmill, it worked?
When the wind blows, rotates and generates.
How much electricity?
12 volts.
And so that lit a light for the house? How many lights?
4 bulbs and 2 radios.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so... Next slide. So who's that?
This is my parents holding the radio.
So what did they make of it? You were 14, 15 at the time, and what did they make of this? They were impressed?
Yeah.
And so what are you going to do with this? What do you, I mean, do you want to build another one?
Yeah, I want to build another one to pump water and irrigation for crops.
So this one would have to be bigger?
Yeah.
How big?
I think it will produce more than 200 volts.
So that would produce irrigation for the entire village?
Yeah.
Wow. And so you're talking to people here at TED to get people who might be able to help in some way to realize the stream?
Yeah, if they can help me with materials, yeah.
And as you think of your life going forward, you're 19 now, do you picture continuing with this stream of working in energy?
Yeah. I'm still thinking to work on energy.
Wow.
Yeah.
William, it's a real honor to have you at the TED conference. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
William!
Is he texting and watching a video at the same time?
Hey, what are you doing?
I'm texting and watching a video at the same time.
You can't do that. You can't do that.
And yet I'm doing it. Yeah.
So TED Talks, you all talks. Almost the same thing. That video, I like that a lot because it gives a completely different image of the one that many people have from Africa. It's about Africa. It's a really entrepreneurial guy. It's a smart guy. He's young. He's making a difference for his community, and he has access to knowledge. And despite the language barrier that is obviously there, so I mean, I don't think he's a man of few words as he appeared there. I think he would be able to talk in a very, very different way, had he been able to talk in his own language. And he would probably have been much better off reading a book about windmills, in his own language. but despite that, you know, he made a big difference, and you can follow that story. You know, this is 5 years old now, so he's built more stuff and more windmills, and done more about energy production in his village. So it's kind of just two aspects of, I think, that are different, or that are important for the discussion that we're going to have. And as you know, the President, President Barry, this morning opened or launched an initiative between the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, and the University of Limerick to co-host the MSc in Multilingual Computing and Localisation in Addis at the UNECA headquarters. And it's an initiative that is supported by GALA, the world's largest industry association, localization industry association, and by the Rosetta Foundation, which is a spin-off from UL. And it's a great pleasure that we can welcome at UL our guests, Aida Opoku-Mensah, who is the Director of ICT in UNECA, and Gary Mudiman, who is the Chairperson of the Board of GALA, and Fenstermacher, who is Co-founder and CEO of GALA here. And the idea of this afternoon is that we that Aida is going to tell us a little bit more about UNECA's work and especially the focus on localization, so that we understand it a little bit better, a little bit more. Hans and Gary about GALA's interest and why they think that that their engagement and their support of this initiative is important for their organization, for the members of their organization. And then we can open up, and it's it's a rather informal gathering, I guess. So if there's any questions, you'd be more than welcome to ask questions as you go along as well. But the purpose basically is to share a little bit about what the situation in terms of localization, multilingualism, and multilingualism in the digital world, what that situation is like in Africa, and the needs and requirements of what is happening already there, and then the connection to entrepreneurs and development, and then we can also talk a little bit about what the project or the initiative that the President launched this morning is about, and what we want to achieve with that. Is that okay? Okay, so I hand over to Aida.
Okay, good afternoon, and for those of you who were not at the launch, my name is Aida. I work for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. I'm responsible for promoting ICT, science and technology in Africa, which is a bit of a tall order for many reasons. But it gives me great pleasure to be here, and particularly excited about the course of the initiative that we've launched. This is because many years ago, having the responsibility as we do to promote the information society, to promote ICTs, to promote technology in Africa, one of the things that struck us many years ago, particularly in 2002, 2003, was that less than 1% of African languages were actually online, despite us having over 2,000 or more languages on the African continent. And that is a profound reality in the sense that it means that if you are going to promote ICTs in Africa, the majority of Africans speak their own language. And therefore, if you are going to promote a so-called inclusive information society, and less than 1% of African languages are online, then effectively you're not really doing very good work, or you're not going to get far. So we realized that we had to build, or we had to create a number of programs to kind of shed light on this and to kind of push a certain agenda, which we did. a few things came out of that. But also we realized that there were some challenges, and these challenges were the fact that we are a continent that is predominantly colonized, give or take a few handful, I would say not more than 5 countries that were not really colonized. Ethiopia being one of them, the North African countries being the other. But the majority of us, I would say, you know, out of these few handful of countries, the majority of us were colonized. And what colonialism left us is that you're better off speaking English, or French, or Portuguese, and that you shouldn't develop your own languages. So what happened is that we are, and I'm sure most of you have heard that Africa is basically an oral society. We didn't develop our languages by way of orthographies or we didn't standardize them. So you will also find that even when it comes to putting our languages online, we have these natural challenges and drawbacks because we didn't develop the languages. They're all oral, and we didn't scholastically develop it either. So there are a number of challenges. It's beginning to, it's starting to get there, but then it becomes an economic issue that if the elite in society are focused on they and their children speaking English, French, or Portuguese, then why bother to pursue African languages? And the reason being, the elite tend to be about 10% of the population, and that you still have 90% of the population that are shut out from this world, and therefore it was incumbent for us to look at that. And so you will find that a number of activities that have developed on the African continent by way of linking languages with technology and linking languages with ICTs is what has created the localization movement. And it's also waking up the linguist section of society and people that are responsible for standards in languages, standardization, and it's beginning to gain root. And even if you look at very older languages like Ethiopia, which are script languages, even there's not been a standard. I mean, I don't know about now, but at the time that we began to work on promoting Amharic, which is the national indigenous language of Ethiopia, standardization still remained an issue. But because there was that movement, it did bring this issue to the fore, and it did bring up the issue of standardization. So in a way, the whole process of localization could contribute towards faster standardization in African languages and faster development of African languages. So for us, this is extremely important because effectively, and in a way, we are almost there anyway, because this is the continent also where with the least penetration of computers, not surprising. But even so, the take-up of computers was the fastest in the world. However, we know that given the fact that we have millions and millions of people who don't speak English, French, or Portuguese, or Spanish, as the case may be, we know that they are totally isolated. But are they? And what's interesting is that, again, you've all heard of the mobile revolution, where Africa is perhaps the second largest continent after America with mobile telephony, surpassing Europe, surpassing, I think Latin America comes third. So Africa has had a way of dealing with its with its inadequacies, if you like, right, with respect to the information society, and we have a mobile revolution. And it's, a lot of people keep saying that Africa invented mobile money, mobile transactions, and it should be recognized for that, because now this is, it's being replicated in the rest of the world for a change, like aid to Norway, radiators to Norway. So the continent has always been resilient in that way, in that because it's an oral culture, mobile is the strongest technology and technological force on the continent, and it's being adapted to everything. My colleagues and I are involved, for instance, in some mobile health applications that we're using, working with some universities, where they're developing mobile health applications for practitioners, medical practitioners, particularly for rural areas of Africa. A lot of things are happening in terms of mobile money. We've set up a mobile commerce initiative for women in Mozambique using the mobile technology. So there's a lot that is happening in technology, and it will be interesting to see how this initiative that we've just launched could produce some expertise in this area, to see how it accelerates the African languages through the mobile technology, and I think that would be something that we should again try to look at in a big way. So this kind of gives you a global sense of where we are. But just before I finish, I was invited to speak at the launch of the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union's Measuring the Information Society report last month in Addis. And it was interesting because 10 of the least connected countries happen to be in Africa. But also 4 of the most innovative countries by way of mobile telephony and mobile technology happen to be in Africa. So it's very interesting, the promise that was there. And out of the 10 countries, it's also because infrastructure, there's not been investment by governments in infrastructure. That is stopping it and causing it. But once infrastructure is in place, it's amazing what can happen in this area. So a lot of opportunities exist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aida. Are there any immediate questions or anything that you just wanted to follow up on now before we...
I'm a bit curious about the ITU because it's caught a bit of attention on the internet as an organization because people are afraid that it's going to be power of the ITU is going to be extended and it's going to be used for censorship and things like that. I wanted to see if you knew something about this. Sorry, it's not very localization related, but now that I have someone who's been inside.
You're talking about internet governance.
Yeah.
Yeah, which because of the meeting that was held in Azerbaijan last week.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, it's not. Its powers are not going to extend. A lot of people have to realize that the ITU is a specialized agency of the United Nations dealing with telecommunications and increasingly ICTs, and that we are as strong as our member states allow us to be strong. And I'll leave it at that.
There's a colleague from the
languages department telling how you this morning. I thought what I enjoyed very much about what you said, and what I thought was very insightful, is that that what we can learn from this, I suppose, is about, or I'd be interested to know what you think about making oral cultures and technology, because sometimes technology can destroy oral cultures. Yes. We find this with smaller languages in Europe, that a lot of speakers are excluded when things go on the web because they don't have the literacy skills and they don't participate. So it would be great if what you're doing could inform how we go forward multimodally, and it doesn't have to be the European model of standardisation and prescriptivism with regards to orthography and things like that. So, you know, that is one route, but is it always the best route? And what you're saying is very interesting. I think we could learn from that. So, and that would be very interesting if that's kind of a way forward as well.
Yes, I think so. I think some kind of a model will emerge, basically because of what exists on the ground. A good example, again, is the introduction of radio in Ghana. And he's from Ghana, but he'll tell you that there was a proliferation of radio in the country. I think there are about 90 odd private radio stations in Ghana. But what it did is that it helped develop the local languages, because every ethnic group wanted to have its own radio and have its own voice heard. And so languages that didn't exist all had this voice, and it encouraged people to phone in and talk in the language that they felt comfortable in. And that strengthened the presence of indigenous language in a way that I guess all the orthographies, standardization of orthographies would not have done.
And it allows for the polyglossia, you know, the kind of mixed practices that people have.
Yes.
Rather than saying, you know, because on the web there's often sort of it's this language or that language, whereas, you know, a lot of language practices are very mixed. So the oral options are nice.
Exactly, and when you listen to the airwaves across Ghana, you hear all these different ethnic languages being spoken, which I find quite refreshing. In the way, and for me, that is a total departure from the European or other Western models. It is a model that is emerging, based, which is endogenous. It's based on the reality on the ground. So yes, we're going to see a lot of that, which is encouraging.
My question is, for example, as an African, I find it also sometimes very inhibiting. Like Solomon is from Ethiopia, and I have to communicate with him in English or also in another colonial language, as we won't understand each other.
Yeah, sure.
So, are there any plans? I mean, some years ago, a couple of decades ago, there was this discussion of having something like Swahili, which is very something to sort of for all Africans, so that we can do away with the colonial.
Yeah, having an African lingua franca.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Are there any plans from the
Well, you do know that Swahili is the official language of the African Union.
Yes.
Now, so I guess slowly we'll get there. But many years before that, I don't know, but certainly many years before that, there was this move to have Africa have about 3 or 4 lingua franca at most, and whereby it will be taught at universities across the continent. And I don't know, for instance, whether you know the University of Ghana was teaching Hausa and Swahili. Yeah, and that was part of that agenda, but of course that didn't materialize. And African Union has plans to look at some of these languages again.
Yeah, I don't know, my perspective, localization means it is not making people, you know, in Africa to speak the same kinds of language, or it's not like that. I know my perspective is just, you know, people should have the right to speak in their own language, to understand, and then, you know, language should not have to be a barrier to use these ICT when technologies at this time. That is, you know, what I'm worrying about. And then, you know, I don't think so everybody should have to speak in English, even in my country, you know, as 80 million people should not have to know either English or French, you know, especially in a rural area. If you go, you know, the government, the officials, every office is medical, or, you know, wherever you go, they speak their own language, and then
if we provide the services into that specific area in their own language, and then, you know, it helps them a lot. At the same time, we fasten the productivity or whatever we are doing on that specific. And people who should have to go and then speaking with other people maybe has to learn English. We don't have to, everybody should not have to know English. You know? So I don't want to make everybody to speak the same kinds of language, rather everybody has the right to use their own language. I think that's the way we should have.
Thank you. No more immediate questions. We can go back to, because a few interesting points that are coming up there. We can go back to those a little bit later on, but maybe I hand over
Well,
to...
I was just, yeah, I mean, you know, and I think it's much better if we engage in a conversation, but to pick up on that, you know, I represent the Globalization and Localization Association, which is an association of companies that provide products and services in the language industry. So it can be technology, it can be language services, translation, interpretation, and all kinds of things like that all around the world. And you know, of course, Africa, as you mentioned, is grossly underrepresented right now in that community, which is part of the problem, because that community is the one that, our community is the one that enables all of this technology, this other outside ICT technology and information, in fact, to be portable and usable by all these language groups. So we need to embrace and include the African languages in this community and share knowledge, because there's a lot of other communities that have dealt with these linguistic problems, and you can use the solutions to solve the problems in the African countries, and at the same time build resources to digitize some of these languages, to create glossaries, terminologies, content, you know, help give them a presence in the digital world. And so we're very keen on that part of this initiative, because, you know, we're talking about not just educating, but helping, training people to then become producers or entrepreneurs in their own markets and language areas to help build this process up wherever they are. So, you know, and I think it's really a community effort that we find now we're really getting into an era of collaborative, interactive development, if you think of it that way. And it's the perfect thing for dealing with some of these issues. So, you know, for us, I think we're very willing and interested to connect companies that do this work to all the initiatives that are going on in Africa, of which there are loads. You know, Unlock and all these other initiatives that are going on, that you know, together we can accomplish it so much better and so much more with more success. So you know, so I think that, and also the sort of mature, you know, we call it the mature language markets like Europe, where localization has been well established, you know, are getting saturated, and companies are looking for new markets for all the goods and services. And of course, you know, as we've said before, Africa and other markets, but Africa largely represents a huge future for that. There's a lot of potential there for development, and companies are starting to really look at those markets and say, we need to be present, we need to build, we need to service, you know, help, and without the language, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to go only so far and then stop. So, you know, I really think that initiatives like this are focused on bringing together the language issue with the economic issues and the you know, development issues to build sustainable, forward-looking infrastructure. So, you know, we're very excited about that. And I don't know if, you know, I could talk endlessly about the localization business, but please don't. Even in the localization business, they don't want me to do that. But you know, so I don't know if anybody has any questions about that, about what we do, you know, in terms of what our approach is. But really, we think of ourselves as an enabler, or as a means to help other parts of society and other parts of the economy develop. And without us, they don't. I mean, it's without the language component, it stops.
I'm a bit curious, what is that GALA has in mind? Because I have my own story that I've created for GALA in this whole setup.
Oh, I'd love to hear that. No, I'd much rather hear that.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, oh, well, they're going to train people to get into localization, hopefully with the idea that there will be some kind of homegrown language service providers, and GALA will kind of try to establish partnerships to connect people. That's what I was thinking, yeah. But I was wondering if there's something other, or if what I was thinking is completely wrong.
No, I think that's fairly close to what we're talking about, and it is a function of providing the training, taking people who are already somewhat engaged in this process, or someone engaged in this area, and bringing training and knowledge together with them, having them partner with our member companies who can work with them to provide additional support, mentoring, training, whatever it is, even some infrastructure and technology, for them to then be able to go and in their home markets implement an idea that they have, or a business that they have, or a venture, or some kind of entrepreneurship around this area that can be connected with the rest of the localization community. So, and I'll be straightforward with you. I think this is in our interest too, because we're going to build resources that we can partner with to service our customers who are looking to do a giant house project. Well, where are we going to find these resources? Well, one of the things we can do is help create them. But it's a win-win, I think, on everybody's part, because these resources are they're scarce even in Europe and the United States, but they're really scarce in places like Africa and India and others. So we need to bring them together with the rest of the community, and I think that's a great story of winning on all sides, because the customers get language support, we get new participants in the process, and languages that were previously very difficult to support, and those folks in market can build entrepreneurial enterprises, and they can, who knows, create a whole industry in their own country, possibly, as the markets develop. So, yeah.
I want to bring a voice that I would call a reality check. Sorry for disturbing this kumbaya spirit. I mean, the African problem is orders of magnitude elsewhere. And you see, I apologize, I don't have totally exact numbers, but I have exact numbers for Senegal. Senegal, I don't have for Africa, but I have for Senegal. And you say Pat, who was speaking at the LRC conference, he had exact numbers worldwide from Ethnologue. And the issue is, the worldwide figures are, the issue is that the median number of speakers of a language is something like, ridiculously low, something like 30,000. And for Senegal, the exact numbers are 37 languages are spoken by 13 million speakers. That basically creates an average number of 350,000 speakers per language. And that must be clear that these numbers cannot create market forces. So you see, if you are speaking about, you see, every person's right to speak their own language, you must talk who is going to guarantee that right.
Yeah, how many people are speaking Icelandic?
I was just going to say
Latvian is 1.4 million.
I know that Latvian is spoken by 250,000 people in Iceland and another 100,000 in the US. But you see, it's a language that has been written since the 13th century. So, and they have
But
enormous...
that's not the reason why it's localized. You know,
And
the reason why it's localized
they
is
have
that
enormous government-driven, you say, funding for developing the language. But you see, a language spoken by 40,000 people somewhere in Africa is not going to do that. It's not
But we're
going
not
to
talking about that.
I mean, I actually tend to agree a little bit about the reality check, but I mean, and I thought that it earlier on, but I don't know if that's necessarily an issue. Do you have the figures for Icelandic for how many speak English as well?
Well, I mean, there's
Yeah.
very interesting
Well,
ways that
probably
localization,
not, but close, yeah.
localization is not about knowledge of English at all.
No.
Look at Europe, you know, look
Yeah.
at the levels of localization in Europe and the levels of knowledge of
Oh,
English.
knowledge of English has an impact for sure.
Not in Europe. Look at Norway, Sweden, they get everything localized. And they have excellent knowledge.
Oh, they get
of
localized,
English.
but I mean, if you go to Sweden, I lectured in Uppsala for a semester. I mean, all the computing books are in English, and when you ask them, do they get them, you know, translated into Swedish? They'll say, well, you can. It takes about a year, and it's a computing book, so it's out of date. So we use English.
Slovak has about...
But I don't know what the point I was trying to get. I don't know if that's the point. I mean,
right. I mean, no. I think you're making a fair point, which is every one of these languages is not going to be able to be treated the same.
Yes.
There's no way that we're going to
Right.
create mature, well-developed localization markets for every one of these 2,000 something languages. It's not going to happen.
no.
But right now it's an embarrassment that we don't have 5 or 10 of them, and spoken by tens of millions of people.
And there are models that we can look at.
There are.
There are models we can look at where you can have 10,000 people that can support that language.
I know it's big on conversation, but you still have to take it in turn because otherwise other people are not going to fit in.
I guess your reference to Senegal is an interesting one, and again I agree with the point that you're making. But you also have to realize that Wolof happens to be the lingua franca of that country, even though it's spoken, there's an ethnic group that speaks it. So one of the things in that sense, and this has been part of the challenge for Africa, is that everybody's saying, well, there are 2,000 languages and everybody needs to be heard. And unfortunately, that doesn't help us. At independence in a number of African countries, these were some of the challenges that every ethnic group said, well, we want our language to be an official language. So what happens? We ended up saying, okay, let English be the default language. So whilst what you're saying is theoretically right, it doesn't help the African cause because of that. Because you have tiny groups of people. And when you actually look at it, it is languages that are broken into various dialects. Do you get me? They're languages that are broken into various dialects, and then it becomes a political issue.
Yeah.
The only African country, sub-Saharan African country that could get across that was Tanzania. When Julius Nyerere at independence said, all right, because they had that problem as well, and Julius Nyerere said, all right, Swahili is going to become the dominant language, and we're not going to go for anybody's language, but this is going to be the lingua franca. And quite frankly, this is where a lot of African countries need to move to.
If I might, just I just want to float an idea because of the fourth partner in this whole enterprise, which is the Rosetta Foundation. And the idea of the Rosetta Foundation, the setup of it, is that there are more reasons to localize than markets. So there's a reason there because to localize content because people speak a language, because they want content in their language, and the other kind of aim of the Rosetta Foundation is to demonstrate and to show and to raise the level of awareness that that localization and translation activities are actually happening without market forces driving that process, and that the localization decision, the decision on whether something should be localized or translated or not, does not have to reside in the 50th floor of a large building in Manhattan somewhere, or just probably small building, 50 floors.
Decent.
But it doesn't have to be decided by an accountant looking at a spreadsheet in the executive class of an airliner somewhere. But it can be decided by the people who speak the language. And then it doesn't depend on how many people speak that language, whether it's 10,000 or 5,000 or 50,000 or 50 million. It depends on whether the people that are speaking that language have sufficient interest, have sufficient drive, have sufficient initiative to get that content, develop that content in their language. So the localization decision all of a sudden is moved from commercial interests and exclusively commercial interests and profit-driven interests to a point where it's the people who decide what they want. And what we are doing with the Rosetta Foundation, what we also do with our research in the localization research, and that's where it all comes together, is what we are aiming at is to enable people to conduct that global conversation in communities. So it's communities talking to each other in their language and using their own language. And then all of a sudden, you have people in Albania, localizing semantic antivirus, as an example, because that has already happened. And how many people speak Albanian? I don't know, but it's not that many. But there are people who are proud of their language, who want their language to succeed and be present in the digital world, and they just do it. And what they need is the means to do it.
What you're talking about is demand-driven process, and traditionally this process has been supply-driven. And this is I think a turning point. There's a shift happening.
Yeah, and it's the tools. It's the tools to enable that that are really needed. Right. The software tools to enable people, if they want to maintain
and the education, and give people access to the means of doing it and teach them how to do this.
So if the language is even 3,000 people, and there are 3,000 fundamentalists, motivated people that want to do it, and then they can do it.
Knock yourself out.
That is what happened. I mean, this is my experience. I mean, this is what we did in Friend Open Source. We try to be visible, Amharic visible. So we become a group of volunteers working together to do something, and then prepare terminologies, create a standard for each thing, and then discuss with the government and concerned bodies. That is what we did. And then now the industry start picking the Amharic, and then this is the way. So
Amharic is a multi-million language. You are not making the point.
But you're David, I tend to agree with you. But the reality will be, if you supply the tools, right, and you enable the people, the reality will be, and I think you will be proven right in a lot of ways. For a lot of languages, they will in effect disappear because there won't be enough effort by the few number of people to put in, and that's sad from a cultural point of view. But I mean, I think that's inevitable. I mean, some languages are going to disappear out of Africa, but at least there should be some sort of natural balance, some crowdsourcing equilibrium where the languages that are people have the most passion about or represented by the most number of speakers will continue to exist.
You see, I'm not a language killer. You see,
you are not a language killer.
I am not a language killer, but I am asking the all-important question: who is going to guarantee the freedom to speak the language? I must be the local prosumer community. No one else can. Right. You see, like if you give them tools, but if there is like a language of 3,000, won't survive. Face it, because they will need to be all linguists to save the language. But it's not feasible. They cannot be all linguists.
But we're not going to decide which language is going to survive.
No, we know. But I mean,
that's where we finished. We take it in turns.
No, I just wanted to say that it's in the interest of African people who want to speak their languages that they manage the process of like amalgamating the languages. So they kind of look at equivalence classes, at dialects, overcome their political differences, and normalize on languages that are close, and that will help them to save their culture, rather than sticking to a language that is spoken by 30,000 or 3,000 people. And one comment on the Swahili language, like Swahili is of course spoken by a large number of people, but the problem is like can a language become lingua franca who has million of verb forms? I don't think so.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I suppose, that maybe one of the issues as well is that I mean, with all due respect to ethnologue, and that there's an obsession with counting numbers of speakers, numbers of languages, big languages, small languages. I think a community of 3,000 speakers is actually very sustainable on the web. With Web 2, Web 2 should be the model, not again the supply side, because then you're forcing things, you're codifying, you're counting. And what happens then is English emerges as the neutral language or a colonial language in a complex multilingual situation. So rather than counting and talking about speakers, you have to look at practices and continua and mutual intelligibility. And we have all these fantastic practices, and they actually can work on the web. This is the interesting thing. So rather than, again, we're approaching from the European model of one culture, one language, you know, my problem with ethnologue and counting is, what about multilingualism, what about mixed practices, all these things. So, you know, I just think, you know, sometimes we have to change our way of thinking, and we can learn from the practices that are there. The other issue about Swahili is a lingua franca, and I mean, Deswan would say it's one of the 12 supercentral languages in the world, but that supercentrality is not being transferred to the web at all, and is being ignored by localizers and commercial providers, certainly. On the web, Hindi is another language whose supercentrality isn't being transferred, because people say 20 languages, India, no, let's just take English. You know, I don't want to start with one language and hurt another group, so they just go for English. So English has this neutral fetish or whatever. Yeah.
But when you talk about 3,000 people, I mean, being enabled with Web 2, I can understand how 3,000 people can use their own language to communicate with each other. But 3,000 people cannot possibly translate even 1% of the web into their own language, even if they work full-time, all the time.
But they can still have a language community, it depends.
They can have a language community, but to access the rest of the web, they need some other language.
They probably do, but
so,
I mean, it doesn't mean that.
So Web 2 cannot facilitate that. Web 2 can facilitate a small information space for their own community, and that's great. But when they want to look up a Wikipedia for some strange cancer, you know, that won't be translated into it, and they'll need to. Now, it might not be English; it might be a larger African language, but you can't facilitate the amount of information maintained by 3,000 people.
Just before I go to Aida and then to Noah, I just want to throw in another aspect which kind of came up but hasn't been made really explicit, and that is that we always kind of, and I do the same thing. I mean, we're thinking about access, you know. So an access in my mind, in my brain, you know, works like, you know, I have to access this, you know. So the question that you raised, you know, 3,000 people cannot possibly, you know, make the web accessible in that language that those 3,000 people speak. No, and they probably wouldn't want to do that, you know. But what is possible is that the people can exchange and share things, so that the 3,000 speakers can keep their language alive and create content in their language. I agree. So it's a conversation. It's not that there is something, you know, in 20 languages, or most of it in English, and then, you know, maybe 30 other languages. But there's, you know, it's an exchange, and it's happening constantly. And not everything can. I don't think that anybody would say that, you know, everything should be accessible in every language all the time. But it's to have the presence. It should be, but it's not that presence. And what is accessible in which language, at the moment is mostly, you know, not exclusively, but mostly driven by, you know, short-term financial return on investment interests, and by large corporations. And the decision center is in the corporations, in the corporate level. And that, you know, is a thing of the past in my mind. And what is not, you know, what has not happened is that the technology and the infrastructure that might be there, but the infrastructure might be there, but the technology isn't there, and the training isn't there to facilitate that exchange and to facilitate the decision making on the demand side. And that is something that we, you know, that they're trying to do with Solas, for example, the technology that we're developing, and it's also something that we're trying to drive with the foundation. And that where we hope that once we get in, you know, the project going with UNECA and GALA, that will kick something off that will be kind of a dynamic will develop where things are just going to start to happen. And this is then going to be the starting point where all of a sudden, once you have a critical mass of content in a language and people being able to participate in the digital world on the web, then it all of a sudden becomes of interest to commercial providers as well, and then you get good markets, so you can grow market. In addition to that, once you make content available in different languages, you will overcome issues in education. As we heard, what Solomon said this morning about not being able to understand books, that teach science because they're not in your language. But that's a story that I've heard all over, and almost at each visit that I made to Africa when I talk to people. You can see that with William there, we got this book out of the library and built a windmill. If stuff like that was available in the language of the people who need the information, they could do so much more, and they could develop so much better and so much faster, which would then create, a level of comfort and economic well-being that will kick off all sorts of other activities as well. Sorry for being so.
Yeah, I just wanted to. In fact, you more or less touched on it, but the fact that there are a number of initiatives that are taking place in Africa, and I think that whilst there doesn't have to be a case made for localization of minority languages, let's just say, there is an economy developing in localization, and it's not for nothing that Google has Amharic, Wolof, Yoruba, Zulu. I mean, these are all languages that Google is working on. So there is that that is coming, and I think that this initiative for me, and this is why we're here, but this initiative, will complement what is already started and accelerate the process in a very big way. And also one has to realize that a number of initiatives. There's this university student similar to the one we just saw from Malawi, who has just developed a digital Zulu, English, Swahili dictionary, for instance. And so you're going to have a lot of these things come in, and a lot of innovation and a lot of creativity going into this as a result of that.
And this was something that we saw when we had the AGIS conference in Addis. A lot of people that came from the outside to Addis thought, we can bring them to Addis. And the table turned,
So, it's the same thing as this windmill. There are a lot of people creating digital linguistic windmills all over Africa with what the materials they've got.
Exactly.
And if we can combine that with better infrastructure and more support and more interaction with the outside community, it's going to go faster and better.
I was born in Japan and grown up in Japan. Now I can read English. I think I can read English. And I can
hopefully write it.
Hopefully write it and improve it in a shorter next year. But then I'm also able to speak in Japanese and read in Japanese. And that was fortunate. I can access to the foreign information directly. But then I can express my thoughts in my language directly. So you can translate. So that's very important. And now, my approach to this is, if in the world, someone can't express their thoughts in digital world, then that's unfortunate. We need to do something. Now, corporates so far left them behind. And if they need some help, we could give them. That's the what I want to do. And I think this is what the Reinhard trying to do, and that's what we're going to do. So that's all.
Actually, now also came up with the idea of free translation at some stage, about a year or two ago. And at the time, everybody was laughing about it here. And it's not so laughable anymore.
It's a reality.
It's a reality.
Is it recorded?
Yeah, I got it.
No, what I meant was say so that a small number of population or number doesn't really matter. It does matter, but then if we can say tools or money or time, someone's money, time, or tool can make it happen, then give them. Give them an opportunity to express their own language. Either if that could be read by somebody else or not, it's another story.
And the fact is that we're in the localization business. So for us, we're always talking about at least two languages, right? Source and target. But most of the world, like real people, don't care about two languages. They only care about one. And so what we're talking about here is giving people the opportunity to use that one language that they're most comfortable in to do whatever it is they're going to do. Now, the additional point is that we've placed large bets on machine translation as being the future for being able to actually convert these pieces of content into other languages so other people can understand them. But machine translation requires content in those languages in order to be able to work. So, you know, why is there not much, well there is now, but why in just a couple of years ago was there not very much Thai capability for Thai machine translation? I'll tell you why, because there was no Thai content on the web.
Yeah.
So what did they do? There was a giant effort made to translate Wikipedia, crowdsourced into Thai, so that you would finally have a bilingual corpus that you could train in order to be able to, you know, so we have to create content in another language in order to be able to have that as a tool to do the translation and localization with. If you don't have that, half of your process is missing. So this is at least a step in that direction, no? David's going to say no.
I have one thing on Swahili. Like there exists one general, general empty engine into Swahili. That's Google's engine, and this one doesn't work because Swahili has millions of verb forms, and you cannot build Swahili engine based on data. You must build Swahili based on the rules, and that's a huge effort.
Yeah, right. And obviously there are exceptions like that. Yeah.
But even so, can I just say, but even so, again, what you're saying is true, but at the same time, it's an inhibiting factor. And if we go strictly according to your argument, then we will never work on Swahili because it has rules. Is that what you're saying?
No,
we cannot expect that we develop the African languages as we've done English, as we've done French. I mean, we will have to forge our own way. It is not going to be something that we will follow. We have to do it based on what we have. And it's not going to be copying any other. So if there are rules, does that stop us from advancing this language digitally? Well, I don't think so. And it is arguments like this that doesn't add value. I'm sorry.
You see, like, I don't say you can't have a Swahili engine, but you quoted the Google efforts into African languages. These are all multi-million African languages, and the reason why Google is doing it are ROI reasons. These are poor money reasons. They are doing it because they see these populations and markets growing, and they want to be there. So they are doing it purely for revenue, nothing else.
Sure.
And regarding building Swahili engine, like, why? Of course you can do it. Like if you have like enough people who care for having a Swahili engine, you can do it. I just say you cannot do it in the traditional statistical method because the rules are too many to be captured by the now common statistical method.
But of course the statistical method isn't that traditional either, because the rules method was the first traditional method. But anyway, but
it's so much more expensive to do it with rules.
But I
so
think
we go
yeah. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I just want to
translate that. I don't know what he just said.
Anyway, I just want to say about the Swahili engine. You know, the industries try to pick some of the languages of Africa, as you say, because this is a growing market to that. But they are not investing, you know, as much as it should have to be. And I think I know that this engine, they just only have been working as a small project based. It is not the way the others are working. That is why it's not the thing. It is investment, as you say. After some time, even they don't have that much corpus as is expected to be, but still they are working on it. What I mean to say that I'm really happy that it is happening, because because something is done for Swahili. Now they started, and then now they started to machine translation. So what I mean to say that why don't we start other language, and then the next time maybe the market is growing, and then they will get a revenue, and then after that they will increase their investment to that, and then next time after 3 or 4 years maybe we will have a perfect machine translation. So.
Mine's just a comment, and I think the space is going to be interesting. I think computing has changed English. All languages are moving targets. They're not precious ornaments. They are moving, flexible, organic things. Computing has changed English, and Google's attempt at writing a translation, a machine translation for Swahili, if it works to some extent, will change Swahili, and probably all African languages will be changed by the internet. It's nearly inevitable. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something that's gonna happen. And part of that changes will be sort of certainly new terms as new information goes into cultures, as they're exposed to different things due to translation. Also, some of it is going to be forced standardization that the computing effect will have on the language. You can't stop it, it will happen. Computing will affect and change language. The English language, I think German in my own sort of understanding, languages have been changed by other things in the past. Religion, King James Bible, a Hochdeutsch, things have standardized language in the past. The German that's spoke now didn't exist 100 years ago. The English I'm speaking today certainly, is totally different to Shakespearean English. So we're going to see this. It's inevitable. It's not something we should stop. It's something we just accept, And I go back to what I was saying before, because I agree with a lot of what David said, but for me, it's important just to put the tools into place. And then you let the organics happen, right? You facilitate whatever happens. Different countries will choose different paths. Politics will make some countries in Africa disappear while new ones appear. And with those will be, new language choices. The important thing is communication, and for us, it's the tools, putting the tools in there. I don't want to make any decisions about which languages live or die. They will make their own decisions on that.
So David, if you want to just respond and then Helen.
No, Chris said nice. Like they will decide if they create prosumer communities who can use the tools, they will survive. That's as simple as that.
I think you were before me.
All right, sorry.
Yeah, I think what Chris said too and what David said is very. But for me, being an African myself and having had the experience of seeing other communities or seeing other language or change through, as I said, influence from the internet. It's good that the effort is being done. That just there's a popular saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one single step. If we look at what we want to achieve, or if we see the problems, we would never start. Or if we look at the distance, how long it would take us to get to B or point Z, we will never start. The first thing is to look at going from nothing to point A. And maybe even if we don't achieve the final goal, our children will be very grateful to take over and continue the good work done. So I think for me it's very good to be here, and it's very good to see what is going on.
I was just going to say, I suppose if you were going to pick a lingua franca for the world, you wouldn't have picked English, okay? Because English has a lot of characteristics that are not so ideal. So, we have sort of stereotypes about language and their fitness for use. But, English is learned and people find English easy because it's the language that they need to learn. But no language has languages aren't things. Do you know what I mean? They're people who use them. So in a sense, like kind of the argument about certain languages are just too complex to be used as lingua franca, I don't really get that. I think we're looking at that from a certain point of view. And you're absolutely right about languages changing. I mean, in the sense that, and Reinhard would know this as well, like there used to be a very strict diglossia, say in places like Switzerland, between media speak and everyday speak, and media speak was Hochdeutsch. That has changed with media and with new media, and now people are, first of all, using their dialect on the web, but also that has come into newspapers, it's come into radio, television, all that sort of thing. So all those things change, as you were saying. What I think is interesting about Google Translate is that it is perhaps challenging our attitudes to what we need. So there's sometimes an obsession with this sort of functional completeness, that a language has to have all the functions and has to be complete and has to do everything. And it's not possible and also not desirable often for people. So I think what's interesting about Google Translate, and I've talked to the students about using it, is, and I know myself, but it kind of is okay, you know, you can tolerate certain things. And I think it's interesting what it does for people in that sense, that if you know a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you can kind of work it out, that's a change in our behaviour or what we demand from translation and localisation, that we can maybe work stuff out and work with it. So, you know, the web is a social machine, it's fed, and we can feed it bit by bit, and we can get there, I think. You know, there's something interesting about the way it works now, and what they're just my thoughts and what people were saying.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, you know, yes, language change, and languages always change. And our expectations from language are changing, as you mentioned with Google Translate. But from a technical perspective, and you know, David, you can comment on this too. How did Google Translate get to where it can do this function in some even crude but acceptable way for certain people? And the way it got there, frankly, was that everyone on the planet dumped their brains into it. Basically what they said was, hey everybody, give us your brains, and then we'll give them back to you. Or in many cases, we'll sell them back to you in the form of this service.
Exactly.
But the point is, that work, and that's work, it's just that they had a huge infrastructure to do it. That work has to be done. And that work hasn't been done in the African languages and many other languages. So that work still has to be done, but that work isn't even ready to be done in many cases because we don't have the content, we don't have the speakers, we don't have the languages even digitized yet. So, you know, I think we have to understand that there are mechanical things that have to, or technological things that have to happen underneath all of this. And then we can have, you know, results.
Yeah, comment on what Hans said, and your name? Helen?
Yeah.
Well, Hans said localization is always about pairs, and that's so true. It's about ordered pairs. You see, the couple is not the same if you are speaking English, Swahili, Swahili, English.
Right.
Actually, the engine Swahili English does pretty good job. And, you see, and if you are also talking about English, Arabic, and Arabic English engines, like you see that there are a lot of American military projects on Arabic, English, English, Arabic. And the Americans are always so amazed how are the Arabic so doomed that they don't understand the machine translation. Well, that's because the Arabic English is orders of magnitude better.
Much better.
Because
are you saying if you want your language really handled well in terms of translation is attack America and put lots of resources into translation?
No, what he's saying is you need professional translators.
I know, I'm joking.
So, like, I know, like, you think that you wouldn't pick English, but I think you would. It's so easy. Like,
no, it's easy because it's just what you said about the web. The web has been fed by English, so you have this huge corpus. So English is there as a result of a huge amount of history and whatever.
Yeah, it's history.
So it's easy. Yeah. It's easy because it's there.
Well, I mean, it is objectively easier than some other language.
I disagree.
But
it's probably harder. It's probably easier. But the reality is,
it's easy to
there.
pronounce. But the grammar is much simpler than Russian or something. But the point is.
So
but you're right about that. the pair, and people misunderstand that.
This is ordered pair.
Yeah.
Nobody is ever going to be in a position, I could be proven wrong, but nobody's ever going to be in a position of choosing a single language for the world. That's not going to happen.
So I just want to, on that note, introduce Briga Heinz, who's from the Kennedy Business School, who couldn't make it earlier, and she's running a program in entrepreneurship.
That's right, and hopefully do some work. Yeah, we're running programs undergraduate, postgraduate, and with entrepreneurs and owner managers. So I was delighted to be asked to be involved in this and hopefully collaborate. Sorry for not being here earlier. Monday is one of my teaching days, so unfortunately to be for a 5 o'clock lecture. So
those students, they're so
I know.
demanding.
This university is a great place for students.
I know.
And we have a colleague here from the humanities as well, which is good. And I just want to get back, and maybe at some stage we should involve you again, maybe. But you made a comment, Helen, which I found really interesting, which is that there's something that has been in my mind all the time when we were thinking about this initiative and about the non-market stuff that is going on, and also about this assumption that things always have to be pushed in one direction. And that is that you say, well, we don't necessarily have to do it in the same way that it has been done for in Europe and for the for the mainstream languages. It can be done in many other ways, and it's also there's a problem in Europe, and this is what I found when I talked to so we have collaborated with organizations who are trying to do translation and localization in Indic languages for some years, and now the last few years with African languages, and they're kind of thinking in terms that that their languages are sort of poor languages, they're under-resourced languages, and all that has to do with the developing world. And that's not really true, because a lot of the stuff that I heard, the problems that they were dealing with were the same problems, the similar problems that I can see in Ireland with Irish. The Basque half of the Basque country, the Catalans have, and then there's this whole movement that is happening. You mentioned about Switzerland. If you go to the north of Germany, they speak Plattdeutsch, or whatever. But there's all sorts of developments where there's kind of dialects or not so powerful or not so rich languages that are being looked after, that have to be looked after, and where the lessons that we could learn maybe from our friends in Africa or from our friends in Asia, are lessons that could be applied to languages in the West or in the North, the global North. Is that something that you wanted to you meant when you made that remark?
Yeah, just I suppose that I suppose history would tell us that we're always going towards the European model of that standard language codify prescriptive norms, one language. The societies are monolingual, which again is the sort of European nationalist idea, and the reality in a lot of the world isn't the same, and that thinking did inform a lot of post-colonial language policies, which were detrimental to multilingualism, but were also detrimental to economic and political growth as well. So it's not. And I suppose I think the web offers us an opportunity to think differently about that, to think differently about language, and I think that's very exciting. I think what we shouldn't do is try to replicate again this sort of functional completeness and discreteness, because we don't actually have to, and people aren't doing that. I mean, and people are just doing their own thing and creating markets and creating products. I mean, very interesting things happening with languages like Occitan, and people just start. I'm going to write the way I write, and I write to my friend, and they write back the way they want to write back. No rules, no prescriptivism. We decide on mutual understanding and intelligibility, and people are running businesses and tourist things and that sort of thing. So I suppose I think there are exciting things, and we should use those exciting things.
It's driven by people. It's not driven by. We haven't touched on another aspect, and this is where you, the kind of business school, might come in, and also to GALA again maybe, is that when we the idea that when we the idea behind this initiative and a lot of the thinking that went on over the last year or two was that access to language and access or exchange of information and knowledge in the language that you need it in drives all sorts of things, and among it entrepreneurship, but also better access to health information, community conversation, all sorts of things that people would like to do and need. And what we want to do with the program that we're going to start, or that we kicked off today, is to have a year of a pilot program where we fund 5 African students from 5 different regions of Africa to develop their localization expertise and skills, and maybe come up with new models and new ideas of dealing with localization problems and translation problems and multilingualism, maybe. And also develop them some business ideas, so that at the end of the year that they do and where they get their MSc, Multilingual Computing and Localisation, is they don't just get their academic title, but they also have acquired some ideas, have developed some ideas, and are in a position to kickstart them off and maybe make a living out of it, and create some kind of enterprise, whether it's a for-profit enterprise or a social enterprise, but to create some activity around it. So it's not just the teaching and the learning and then it's over, but that together with GALA, who have to support this with business mentorship and hopefully from your program, that we can develop some entrepreneurial skills as well.
I think even when you talk about language, there's a lot of interesting issues about the language of business as well, and how transferable or not it is. And I think even that side of it broadens the whole area of how common languages is in terms of business, because I think there's very different kind of terms used and different meanings in different contexts, particularly between social and non-social enterprises. There's an interesting debate happening there as well, and if we can develop that further. But I think what we're looking at is really how we can get individuals to transfer their learning in a practical sense back into an environment where it can be starting a business or helping others start businesses. So we create role models as well into the environment, and hopefully then they can spread that kind of positivity.
And we were also thinking about, going back or connecting it to the Welsh Foundation as well, is to maybe to look at different, because there's not just different languages, there's also different approaches to doing business. In different regions of the world, and interaction and cultural things that have an influence on the way that people interact, and not just
language as well. We're very open to ideas as well if people want to have, because it's a new and interesting venture for us as well. And we have a lot of expertise in the enterprise area, and we work with different institutions in different countries, so certainly there's particular areas that we can incorporate into the program to do it.
So I'm not sure whether everybody is familiar with the mechanics or the approach that we have that we envisage, and the idea is that we are going to set up an expert group on African language issues and localization issues over the next weeks or months, hopefully more weeks than months. And we have, Solomon mentioned that this morning. We've worked together with groups in Africa over quite some time now, maybe 2 years or longer, 4 years, with the African Network for Localization, and then with AGIS last year with the groups. There were kind of half a dozen, roughly, of different groups represented there that are already active in different areas like knowledge development, and mobile computing and localization. And that expert group helps us to, select those 5 students from the 5 different regions of Africa. We set up a local center at UNECA in Addis, at your labs, and get those students there for a 2-week period to have kind of an induction course and seminars, and also give them access to the technology that is currently available. Make sure that they know how to work with that, and then we let them participate in the distance learning program of the MSc in Multilingual Computing and Localisation over the coming months, or between starting in September up to December. And middle of December is the first semester. Towards the end of the first semester, we're going to visit them in their countries and see, make sure that they're engaged with the progress, that they're making progress. And in the second semester, then we're eventually going to bring them everybody over to Ireland and get them in touch with some of the localization businesses here and enterprises, and also make them, make them work with the annual summer school that we're running in the RIC. And that might be an opportunity where we maybe can organize some courses and also some interaction with the County Business School, and also with the languages, and it's a very long name that I can never remember.
It's too long. Everybody wants to be included.
Very inclusive.
To be too inclusive.
Well, maybe earlier even, so it's, I think this is the first time, and this is what I find really exciting. I've been at UL for, 97 or something. This is really the first time that we're sitting around a big table with colleagues from different faculties and different departments, talking about something similar at least. And there's a lot of stuff that is coming together here from the academic point of view, and then we have GALA here, and we have the UN, the ITCA, and I think there's also 4 really, really talented programmers and a brilliant mind in standardization. So we have a group here together of people that can really make a difference, and I think it's the word exciting has been overused quite a bit. And it means different things to different people, I guess. But this is a very promising initiative, and it's great that there's so many people interested in it and will be able to contribute to it, I hope. So we can bring it to an end, unless there's something that we haven't said, a question that we haven't answered or that hasn't been asked yet. So this is the first the first time that we sat around a round table. I hope it will happen more often in the future, in the different locations and with different people.
Very good.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having a conversation with us.
That's the start of a global conversation.
Yes.